Clownfishes are so cute and look so happy, but have you ever wondered how they live in the ocean? What kind of challenges do they face? When I was young, I always wondered if fishes needed to wake up early and go to school. Well, they do. Today I'm going to break down the mistakes made, what you should do, and how to beat the hideous little ogre named Darla in Finding Nemo. Spoilers ahead, enjoy! Marlin and his wife Coral, two clownfish, taking the view from their new residence inside a sea anemone that faces a coral reef drop-off. Their clutch of eggs is concealed in a tiny hole beneath them. They debate names as they prepare to become parents for the first time. Coral expressing her preference for Nemo. They happily flirt with one another until Coral is drawn away by the apparition of a barracuda. If I were a clownfish, I would use creative ways to protect my eggs from predators. To begin with, I would choose a safe, secluded spot to lay my eggs. I would look for an area with plenty of coral, rocks, or sand to hide my eggs. I would also try to find an area with a strong current to help keep predators away. I would also make sure to stay close to my eggs at all times. This way I can let predators know that I'm nearby and that I'm watching over my eggs vigilantly. If any predators come close, I will let them know that I'm not afraid to fight for my eggs. In addition to staying close to my eggs, I would also make use of camouflage. I would cover my eggs with sand or small pieces of coral to help them blend into their environment. This way, predators won't be able to easily spot them. I would also take advantage of the other fish in the area. I would get them to help me protect my eggs by swimming around the area and making a lot of noise. This will help scare away any predators that might be lurking nearby. Finally, I would also look for places to hide my eggs. I would look for crevices in the rocks or small holes in the sand. This way, my eggs will be completely hidden from predators. These are just some of the creative ways I would use to protect my eggs if I were a clownfish. Keeping my eggs safe is my #1 priority and will do whatever it takes to ensure their safety. Coral moves to defend her eggs against Marlin's instructions to hide, and the barracuda rushes at her. Marlin charges in but is knocked out by the barracuda with a flick of its tail, throwing him back into the anemone. The eggs and Coral are gone when he awakens that night, but he's able to locate one remaining egg with a scratch in its right side. He gives the codling the name Nemo and swears to keep it safe. Nemo is raised by Marlin in a safe anemone deeper within the reef. Nemo wakes up his father early in the morning of his first day of school by flapping his little right fin erratically. Marlin, who appears too protective and skeptical of Nemo's independence, assists him in getting ready for the day. Nemo asks Marlin on the way to school how old sea turtles live to be. Marlin isn't able to provide an answer. Marlin then accompanies Nemo to school. The neighbor teacher, Mr. Ray, takes the kids on a field trip. Marlin swims after them in a panic as he discovers that they're heading to the drop-off. Nemo arrives and, after becoming disinterested in Mr. Ray's lecture, accompanies 3 of his classmates to the edge of the reef, where they spot a boat whose name was misspelled as a butt, anchored in the distance. They challenge one another to swim out in the open water to touch the butt. Marlin approaches and shouts at Nemo for risking himself when he realizes what the kids were betting on. Marlin is engaged in conversation with Mr. Ray when Nemo swims ferociously out to sea and stops beneath the boat. As a parent, if you have a defiant kid, at times it can be quite challenging to tame their spiritedness. But I believe that with a little creativity, I can help my kids learn to manage their behavior better. First, I like to take a time-out approach. This can be very effective in helping kids learn to manage their behavior. I like to explain to my kids that if they're not able to control their emotions and behavior, they need to take a break. This could be in a separate room or in a corner away from the action. I will explain that while they're taking a break, they need to think about how they can change their behavior. This usually helps them to gain some perspective and gain control of their emotions. Second, I like to use rewards and consequences. For example, I'll explain to my kids that if they follow the rules, they will earn a reward. This could be a treat, a special outing, or a small toy. Conversely, if they're not able to follow the rules, then there will be a consequence. This could be taking away privileges, like not being able to watch their favorite show for a week or having to do extra chores. Third, I like to use positive reinforcement. For example, when my kids are behaving well and following the rules, I will make sure to praise them and let them know that I appreciate their efforts. This helps to reinforce positive behavior and encourages them to continue making good choices. Finally, I like to be consistent. Consistency is key when it comes to taming defiant kids. I'll make sure to enforce the same rules and expectations every day. This helps my kids to understand what behavior is expected of them. and it helps to minimize the chances of misbehavior. Nemo makes a defiant gesture by touching the boat with his fin and beginning to swim away, but a diver suddenly materializes behind him and captures him in a little bag. Another diver stops Marlin from swimming out after his son by taking a photo while confusing him. After the boat leaves the reef, Marlin swims after the divers after regaining his vision. The diver slips his mask into the water as he deposits Nemo in a cooler of water. Marlin pursues the boat in the water but ultimately loses sight of it. He descends to the ocean floor and cries out to any passing schools of fish for assistance until he runs upon Dory, a majestic tang. She claims to have seen the boat and points out where it went to a grateful Marlin. But as they swim, she starts to relax and even attempts to elude him when she realizes he's following. He interrogates her when she confronts him, and she apologizes while claiming to have short-term memory loss. Marlin, who's perplexed, starts to go but is stopped by Bruce, a great white shark who introduces himself. In spite of Marlin's protests, he takes them to his hideout in a submerged submarine surrounded by active sea mines after inviting them to an event he's hosting. Before the assembly starts, they meet Hammerhead Anchor and Mako Chum, two of Bruce's fellow sharks, and they make a commitment not to consume fish. When Marlin first notices the diver's mask trapped on a piece of metal, the two are somewhat afraid about the sharks. When he examines it, he finds marks on the strap that could provide him information about Nemo's whereabouts. As Marlin tries to take the mask back, a tug-of-war ensues and the mask breaks into Dora's face, giving her a nosebleed. Dory then takes up the mask to test whether the sharks can read it. I'm always a little apprehensive when I head out into the open water. One of my biggest fears is coming face to face with a shark. If you ever bled underwater, you know the risks of attracting a shark can be even greater. Here are a few things I would do if I had a nosebleed underwater like Dory. I would stay calm. Your first instinct may be to panic, but try to stay as calm as possible. It's important to remember that sharks don't have a natural instinct to attack humans and that most shark encounters are simply a case of mistaken identity. I would immediately leave the area. If you're able to, it's best to leave the area as quickly and as safely as possible. This can be difficult if you're in an area with strong currents, but it's important that you try to make your way out. If you stay in the same area, the chances of a shark spotting you and mistaking you for prey increases. I would avoid attracting sharks with lights. If you're diving or snorkeling at night, it's important to avoid using any lights that can attract sharks. Sharks are attracted to light, so it's best to stay away from any artificial lights. I won't swim alone. If possible, it's always a good idea to swim with a buddy. Sharks are less likely to approach a group of people than a single person. I would wear dark colors. Sharks are attracted to bright colors, so it's best to avoid wearing any bright colors while you're in the water. Instead, opt for darker colors that blend into the environment. I would wear a shark repellent, though it might not be possible for fishes, but hey, we never know. They might have shark repellents in the fish kingdom. If you're still feeling nervous about encountering a shark, you can wear a shark repellent. Shark repellents are typically made from a combination of citronella, clove oil, and other ingredients that can deter sharks from approaching you. By following these tips, you can help reduce your risk of running into a shark if you ever find yourself bleeding underwater. Remember to stay calm, leave the area if possible, and avoid attracting sharks with lights or shiny jewelry. Also, don't swim alone and wear dark colors to blend in with the environment. Finally, avoid feeding any sharks that you come across and wear a shark repellent if you're still feeling nervous. Bruce's inner carnivore is roused by the smell of the blood, and despite Anchor and Chum's attempts to restrain him, he recklessly follows Marlin and Dory through the submarine while grabbing the mask in his jaws. Before Dory and Marlin seek safety in a torpedo well, Dory demonstrates that she can read human speech during this period. Marlin has time to grab the mask and dive back into the well as Dory launches a torpedo which wedges in Bruce's mouth. Before the torpedo detonates in one of the mines and sparks a tremendous chain reaction of explosions throughout the whole minefield, Anchor and Chum are able to get Bruce's attention again. Nemo is then transferred to a different container, which turns out to be a fish tank at a dentist's office. Bloat the pufferfish, Bubbles the yellow tang, Peach the ochre sea star, Gurgle the royal grama, Jacques the French accented Pacific cleaner shrimp, and Deb, a black-tailed humbug who thinks her reflection is her twin sister Flo, are some of the initial creatures he encounters there. After briefly discussing dental treatments with the other fish, a pelican by the name of Nigel perches himself on the window next to the tank and welcomes Nemo. The dentist shoos him away after showing Nemo a photograph of his niece DARLA, to whom Nemo has been betrothed. She's called a fish killer by the other fish who shudder. Nemo retreats out of fear and the desire to return home and becomes impaled in the filter's suction tube. The other fish swim over to aid Nemo, but Gil, a wise Moorish idol with noticeable scarring on his right side, instructs Nemo that he must free himself and gives him support. Nemo succeeds in freeing himself, and Peach, like Gil, attributes his fortitude to his oceanic ancestry. Following the blasts, Marlin and Dory find the submarine perched perilously over the brink of a steep ravine. As a result of their actions, the submarine abruptly tips forward and slams against a rock wall on the opposite side. In the midst of the confusion, Dory drops the mask. Marlin concedes defeat, but Dory gleefully lowers him into the water and instructs him to keep swimming. In a little while, they discover a sinister and seductive glow that regrettably belongs to a ravenous anglerfish. Marlin discovers the mask during the chase and diverts the anglerfish long enough for Dory to read the address on it. The anglerfish is then guided by Marlin toward the mask. Dory is thrilled to discover that she can recall the address P. Sherman 42 Wallaby Way, Sydney, and recites it. Now, I love Dory and she's very cool trying to help Marlin get to his son, but come on, she's going to forget it right away. Why did Marlin not get a look at the address himself? Just in case. Jacques awakens Nemo and takes him back to the aquarium, where the other fish perform an initiation to accept Nemo into their club and give him the moniker Sharkbait. The fish would then be placed in baggies on the counter, where they would roll out the window to the street, cross it, and land in the harbor if Gil were to jam the gear into the filter, making the tank so unclean that the dentist would have to physically clean it. Gil claims that Nemo is small enough to fit through the filter and pass back through the tube despite the other fish's skepticism. Nemo concurs. Marlin and Dory ask a school of moonfish for instructions to Sydney as they continue on their adventure. They provide a stunning demonstration of their coordinated impressions before telling Marlin and Dory to take the East Australian Current or EAC. Marlin decides to swim over it in order to escape the terrifying confinement. As Dory sees the EAC, she becomes sidetracked and is stung by a little jellyfish. A school of bigger jellyfish suddenly surrounds them while Marlin attends to her. Marlin and Dory quickly leave the school after discovering that the caps don't hurt. Marlin emerges first, and when Dory doesn't show up, he returns to the water to get her. When he fights to bring her out while being stung repeatedly, he finds her unconscious and damaged from the pain. He succeeds, but after being stung and worn out, he passes asleep as a huge shadow approaches him. Gil is watching the dentist as Nemo waits in the fish tank for a good opportunity to jam the filter. Gil recounts that Nemo's initial escape attempt ended with him landing on dental instruments, even though he was heading for the bathroom when he saw that Nemo was examining his scars. He asserts that fish were not intended to dwell in aquariums and that all drains flow to the ocean. Nemo dives into the filter as Pete shouts out that the dentist is taking a potty break. Nemo jams the fan, halting the water flow as Gil throws him a stone and issues commands. Nemo is being pulled backwards by the fan as the stone comes loose as he's passing through the pipe to return to the tank. Nemo receives a plastic kelp stand from the other fish, who hastily send him to pull him out. Peach, shaken, begs Gil not to put Nemo through the filter once more. Gil is sullen and declares they are finished after discovering his idea placed Nemo in a terrible risk. As this is going on, Marlin awakens to see Crush, a laid-back sea turtle with a surfer's attitude, lying on top of him. He realizes to his astonishment that there are several other sea turtles and large fish traveling beside him on the EAC. Marlin meets Crush's kid Squirt and is reunited with Dory, who has a scar from jellyfish stings on her side. Marlin also gets to know Crush's adventurous kid Squirt. Squirt unintentionally escapes the current while having fun with the other sea turtles. Marlin first feels anxious, but Crush reassures him that Squirt can take care of himself. Squirt successfully navigates the stream to rejoin his father with joy. Marlin observes that turtles of all ages may learn to live in the ocean. Squirt and the other hatchlings beg Marlin to continue the narrative after hearing some of the specifics of their voyage and the experience with the jellyfish. With some hesitation, Marlin decides to start with a time when Nemo was kidnapped. His tale is not forgotten. It is passed on to Nigel, the pelican from the turtle, fish, dolphin, and forth. He takes off for the dentist's office after hearing Nemo's name. There, Nemo tries to make amends to Gil for the failed escape attempt, but Gil responds that nothing should be worth Nemo's urge to go, which nearly cost him his life. After smashing through the shuttered window when he first arrives, Nigel recovers and is able to tell Nemo the tale of Marlin's adventure. Nemo is more impressed with his father after Nigel says that he defeated 3 sharks in a school of jellyfish. Nemo decides to try the filter attempt again on his own and is successful this time. Until they reach their departure point when Crush and Squirt direct them to leave the main line, Marlin and Dory continue along the EAC. Squirt pulls them into the exit flume and back into open water, following a strange instructional speech on correct departing technique. Marlin thanks Crush and inquires about his age, to which Crush responds, 150 years old and yet youthful. They are told to go to Sydney via a huge cloud of purple plankton. They quickly get disoriented though, and Dory decides to approach a far-off fish for help. Although Marlin is first terrified, he decides to put his confidence in Dory, who then calls out to the shadowy figure. She begins saying whale and cries out for assistance when she realizes it's a minke whale. Just as a whale comes from behind and engulfs them, Marlin loses patience with her once more. Back in the fish tank, a few days without a filter had caused green algae to cover every available surface. The dentist decides to clean the tank the following morning before DARLA arrives after noticing this. Looking out the window, Nemo wonders if his father is already waiting for him on the port outside. Marlin and Dory are safe and have access to water in the whale's jaws. Marlin makes a vain attempt to escape by slamming at the whale's baleen, despite Dory's complacency. He rants at Dory for allegedly speaking whale, labels her mad, and laments the fact that he will never again see his kid. The whale calls as the water in his mouth starts to drain as Dory attempts to comfort him. The whale then raises its tongue in an attempt to force Marlin and Dory to the back of its throat, but Marlin won't release until Dory reassures him that even though she doesn't know what will happen, everything will be well. Marlin shuts his eyes and lets go of the tongue of the whale. They arrive in Sydney Harbor after being propelled out of the whale's blowhole after falling to the back of its throat. Marlin, who's relieved to have arrived, thanks the whale and asks Dory to assist him in locating the vessel that transported Nemo. The tank is suddenly clean when Peach awakens the next morning in a terrified state. The fish discover that the dentist had recently installed a new high-tech filter, and while they're thrilled with the device's smooth performance, they're concerned about what they will do when DARLA gets here. Nemo is abruptly pulled up by the dentist in a fish net, but Gil and the other fish swim into it and tell Nemo to swim down. Releasing the doctor's hold on the net and allowing it to fall into the tank, Nemo is swiftly snatched up in a plastic bag and placed on the counter despite their best attempts. The other fish order Nemo to roll out the window, but the dentist stops him in his tracks by putting the baggie in a tin. I wonder if we were ever measured fish IQ because they're brilliant. While Gil tries to reassure Nemo that everything would be well, DARLA bursts into the office. Tired from searching for boats all night, Marlin and Dory continue to scour the port when they are snatched up by a pelican and placed in its beak. The pelican swoops down and swallows them, but Marlin refuses to go all this far to become dinner. He puts Dory and himself into the pelican's throat, which starts it choking. After taking a snooze close by, Nigel wakes up to see Jerry the pelican choking and falling to the ground. Marlin yells that he has to find Nemo as he throws Dory and Marlin onto the dock after punching Jerry in the back. As Nigel recognizes the name, he turns to Jerry with excitement and informs him that the fish they've been hearing about is this one. He looks back to Marlin and observes that Dory and him have floated to the end of the dock. When Nigel pursues them, they're all forced to stop when they realize that ravenous seagulls are all around them. When Marlin hears that Nigel recognizes his son Nemo, he flips in excitement, forcing the seagulls to dive in front of him. Nevertheless, Nigel is able to grab both Dory and Marlin in his jaws and fly away. Before entering the room to visit her uncle, DARLA torments the fish in the aquarium. He takes up the baggie containing Nemo and sees that the fish is floating upside down. The dentist proceeds toward the trash can just as Nigel enters the window, and the other fish immediately realize that Nemo is pretending to be dead so that he may be flushed down to the toilet. Nigel is dragged inside the office by Marlin, and the dentist leaves the baggie behind. After the dentist snatches Nigel and throws him out the window once more, Marlin sees Nemo drifting and assumes he's dead while yelling for Nemo. Nemo stands up when he hears his name, but DARLA grabs the bag and begins shaking it in an effort to wake up the fishy. The bubbles drive Gil out of the tank as he wedges himself into the summit of Mount Wanahakalugi. DARLA puts Nemo's backpack on a table covered in tools when he crashes on her head, shattering the plastic. Gil uses a magnifying scope as a catapult to launch Nemo into the sink and down the drain after falling off DARLA's head and landing next to him. Gil is swiftly returned to the tank where he may breathe by the dentist. Gil reassures the others that Nemo is safe and that all drains flow to the sea. As DARLA becomes agitated, the sink squirts water in her face. Nemo descends the plumbing until it finds a system of pipes that travels on the ocean floor away from the harbor or a water treatment filter. Marlin and Dory are released into the ocean as Nigel flies out of the harbor while conveying his sorrow. Marlin, overcome with emotion, thanks Dory for her assistance and starts to swim away. She requests that he remain by saying that she remembers things better when he's around and that she doesn't want to forget. Marlin declines and swims off, abandoning her on her own. When Nemo comes out of the pipe, he cries out to his father. Dory's discovered by him swimming bafflingly behind a buoy and complaining that she can't recall who she's lost. Even though she doesn't recognize him, Dory accepts Nemo's offer to seek alongside her. Together, they stumble upon a piece of pipe that has the word Sydney written on it as they swim. All of her memories suddenly come rushing back to her, and she rushes up to Nemo and gives him a tight hug before pointing him in the direction that Marlin departed. They meet up with Marlin again in the middle of a sizable school of fish after learning that he was on his way to fishing grounds. The fish school screams in fear as a huge net from a fishing boat above engulfs them. Nemo says he must swim in and tell the fish to swim down since Dory is entangled in the net. Marlin lets go and lets Nemo do what he can despite his concern for his safety. As Marlin gives the terrified fish instructions from outside the net, they quickly begin to swim in unison downward, dragging the net behind them until it eventually snaps free from the boat, releasing all the fish. As Marlin and Dory discover Nemo behind the dense netting, Marlin is devastated because he thinks Nemo has passed away. As Nemo awakens, Marlin gently informs him that he recently learned that sea turtles may live for 150 years. After reaching an agreement, Marlin and Nemo return to the reef, where they all live. Marlin's attitude has improved, and he now exudes optimism and confidence in his son's skills. Dory's dropped off to school by Bruce, Anchor, and Chum after being accepted into their vegetarian program, and he drives him there. Before leaving for another outing with Mr. A, Nemo gives his father a final embrace. Marlin watches them go because he's confident that his son will be safe. Back at the Sydney dental practice, the dentist bemoans the abrupt failure of the sophisticated filter. As he finds that the fish have suddenly vanished off the counter, he grumbles about having to put all of the fish in the baggies. Peach is the last to cross the roadway and land herself in the port with the other fish as horns blare out the open window. Bloat muses, "Now what?" as they float in their baggies, unable to leave their prison. The little fish that Chum's buddy at the support group is being pursued by the anglerfish in the post-credits. The little fish suddenly widens his mouth to a startlingly gigantic size as the anglerfish moves in to engulf him. Darla is the 8-year-old niece of Philip Sherman, a dentist. She's not a villain since she's not genuinely bad, but rather a lively child who regularly gets very thrilled when given pet fish. Ironically, her eagerness has repeatedly led her to killing the fish by accident. Darla is described as a fish killer by Gil and the other fish in Sherman's aquarium, and Nemo is meant to be her new pet fish. She murdered Chuckles, the last fish she had gotten the year before, since she wouldn't stop shaking the bag he was in. Nemo could have tried turning black as Darla likes her fish alive and colorful. She's very young and wouldn't want a dying fish in her collection. Nemo's plan about playing dead was also a great idea. What do you guys think? If you saw a child abusing animals, not necessarily for malicious intent, but due to overexcitement, what would you do? Don't forget to comment below and subscribe to this channel for more interesting videos. And that's all for today's video. Don't forget to like and subscribe to many such videos. Thanks for watching and take care.